Hello! Here you will find numerous outrageous real-life criminal stories, and this case is no exception. Let's delve into it together and see for ourselves. Appearances can often be deceiving. Behind an attractive and captivating exterior, there may hide a true psychopath. Unfortunately, it's not always possible to realize this in time to escape and avoid falling into a vicious cycle. Alicia Muñiz was born on August 18, 1955 in Montevideo, the capital of Uruguay. Nearing adulthood at the age of 17, Alicia moved to Argentina. She later obtained citizenship in this country. During this time, the young and beautiful Alicia began taking her first steps toward a career in fashion. She aspired to become a model or designer. However, at the beginning of her journey, her work was far from the design industry. Alicia needed money to fund her education, so she started working as a dancer in several prominent clubs. With her slender figure, striking looks, and charismatic personality, she was quickly welcomed into these shows. However, Alicia was determined not to settle for such performances. She managed to make influential connections and took the stage at the prestigious Buena de Aires. It was here that her career began to take off. Alicia started pursuing acting and appeared on television. Her beauty and ambitious nature helped her gain popularity quickly. As a result, she became the host of a widely watched show of the era. Everything seemed to be falling into place perfectly. All that was missing was a charming partner to complete the picture. Everything changed one night in 1978 when Alicia met Carlos Monzon. The two crossed paths at a dinner organized by mutual friends following the World Cup, which had taken place that year in Argentina. It was a grand event, and their social circle, known for their love of parties, couldn't miss it. Carlos immediately noticed Alicia. At that time she was 23, while Carlos was 8 years older. During this same period, Carlos had retired from professional boxing, concluding an illustrious career. Carlos had achieved the title of middleweight boxing world champion. He won the title and defended it numerous times throughout the 70s and early 80s. In total, he successfully defended his title 14 times, holding the middleweight championship belt. Carlos never knew defeat and chose to end his sports career at the peak of his success. Regarded as one of the greatest in his discipline, his popularity in Argentina was immense. This even allowed Carlos to play lead roles in several films of that era. Naturally, the athletic and wealthy Carlos captivated Alicia with his looks and charisma. They began dating, and it seemed they were the perfect couple. However, Carlos's story wasn't always filled with fame and success. He grew up in an environment marked by deprivation and challenges. Born into a poor family in Argentina, Carlos spent most of his life there. During his childhood, his parents sought better opportunities and moved from a small town to Santa Fe, settling in a densely populated area. Despite their efforts to find work, money was still scarce. Carlos dropped out of school to take odd jobs and help support his family. He worked tirelessly, primarily shining shoes on the streets. It was in this environment that Carlos discovered boxing and began training, believing it would help him protect himself and his family in the future. Gradually, boxing became his main goal. Carlos dreamed of stepping into the ring and becoming a champion. While working hard, he also delivered newspapers and beverages to earn a living. Always athletic and charismatic, Carlos was popular with women. His most famous romantic conquest was Susana Giménez, a celebrated actress and television host of the time. Carlos divorced his wife, Mercedes, with whom he had 3 children, to pursue a relationship with Susana. However, Mercedes was the first to expose his darker side publicly. She revealed Carlos's bouts of anger, manipulative behavior, and a tendency to resort to physical violence when unable to achieve his goals through emotional pressure. Alicia became his next partner. At the time, she was at the height of her popularity. After meeting at a party, the two quickly became inseparable. Fortunately, Alicia heeded her parents' warnings and decided not to rush into formalizing the relationship. While she was tempted by the prospect of being with such a promising man, she knew it was important to weigh her options carefully. In any case, the couple was inseparable, enjoying fame and entertainment together. Initially, their relationship seemed happy and loving. Carlos, now retired from professional boxing, had ample time to devote to Alicia, which appealed to the young star. However, within months, Alicia began to notice Carlos's unhealthy relationship with alcohol. The famous boxer struggled to control himself, often drinking heavily and behaving erratically. His bouts of anger escalated, and after 9 months of dating, Alicia decided to end the relationship. Yet, like a true manipulator, Carlos apologized profusely and promised that his aggression would never happen again, vowing to change his behavior. Naively, Alicia believed him, but nothing changed. Carlos was extremely jealous and behaved like a possessive tyrant, attempting to control every minute of her life. He invaded her personal space and even hindered her career. As a result, Alicia's fleeting successes turned into constant failures. Those around her believed that Carlos was the primary reason for her career's decline. Alicia left television and abandoned her acting career, turning instead to the beauty industry. She decided to become a stylist and, as part of his repeated apologies, Carlos provided a significant amount of money to help her open a beauty salon. These gestures of generosity also kept Alicia tied to him. However, even in her new venture, she struggled to escape the relentless control of her obsessive boyfriend. To those around her, Alicia tried to maintain the appearance of happiness, leading many to believe the couple was doing well. However, this was far from the truth. Despite their issues, they decided to marry in 1981. Their honeymoon took them to Miami, Florida, in the United States. After returning from the trip, they announced to the press that they were expecting a child, as Alicia was pregnant. By then, Carlos's erratic behavior and violent nature were public knowledge. The couple's high-profile relationship fueled widespread curiosity, and the news of their impending parenthood raised many questions. During an interview, Alicia mentioned that the prospect of becoming a father seemed to have brought positive changes in Carlos. She observed that he was calmer and more composed, viewing their child as a blessing that could strengthen their bond. Previously, Carlos had been a partygoer, often staying out for days, but this behavior appeared to change. Even Carlos admitted during interviews that he felt grateful to fate and to his wife for the chance to become a father. He believed the timing was perfect, as he had retired from his career, earned substantial wealth, and achieved stardom. He now had the means to provide for his child without the struggles he had faced growing up. Their son Maximiliano was born on December 28, 1981. Alicia dedicated herself to raising their son, believing that everything was falling into place. However, Carlos soon relapsed into heavy drinking, which reignited his aggressive tendencies. Alicia once again faced emotional abuse and verbal insults, which escalated into physical violence. Several witnesses recounted incidents where Carlos's abusive behavior was evident. One evening at a nightclub, friends overheard Alicia admitting that she endured horrors at the hands of her husband. These accounts quickly became public, as the couple's private life was a topic of fascination. Alicia appeared on television again, but her tone had changed significantly from her earlier optimism about their family's future. She revealed that Carlos had not truly changed, merely hiding his issues until after the child's birth. She expressed exhaustion from the toxic relationship and stated that she could no longer endure the domestic violence. Despite her efforts to support, forgive, and help Carlos, Alicia reached her limit. She described him as a big child who would lash out whenever things didn't go his way. Following this, the couple separated for the first time, though they didn't divorce and eventually reconciled. Carlos didn't pursue Alicia during their separation, which convinced her that he had genuinely changed. However, this pattern of breaking up and reconciling became the norm in their relationship. Their tumultuous dynamic often made headlines, with public commentary treating their issues as publicity stunts rather than real threats. By 1986, after their fourth breakup, Alicia declared that living with Carlos was impossible due to his constant emotional instability. She described how he could be warm and loving one moment, only to accuse her of infidelity and escalate into violence the next. Despite her fears for her life, Alicia continued the relationship. Her concerns were so severe that she became a regular at the local police station, filing numerous reports against Carlos. Whenever she called law enforcement to their home, Carlos would calm down and negotiate with the officers, convincing them to leave. This cyclical pattern of abuse and reconciliation trapped Alicia in a dangerous relationship. To outsiders, Alicia tried to maintain the image of a happy life, and many assumed her relationship with Carlos was fine. However, this was far from reality. By this time, Alicia had become genuinely concerned for her safety, but was horrified to find that the authorities were unresponsive. Every time Carlos faced accusations, he managed to avoid consequences simply by showing up at the station. As a celebrity, Carlos enjoyed privileges that allowed him to escape accountability. Additionally, he seemed to have connections within the police, as Alicia's repeated reports and evidence, including photographs of injuries, were ignored. Despite having documented instances of domestic violence, Carlos easily convinced officers that these were mere misunderstandings, and they believed him. Finally, Alicia decided to leave Carlos for good and focus on raising her son. She also planned to restart the career she had abandoned because of her tumultuous relationship. In mid-1987, Alicia began working on her modeling career again and developed her own line of designer clothing. Although she hoped to be financially independent, she underestimated the challenges. Still, Alicia was determined and returned to the runway. Around this time, People began noticing concerning marks on her body, particularly bruises on her arms. Everyone suspected what was happening. Despite her attempts to separate from Carlos, she continued to endure his harassment. It was a nightmare that seemed impossible to escape. Alicia described how Carlos would act on a pattern. He would show up at her apartment early in the morning, pounding on the door until she felt she had no choice but to let him in. Once inside, the shouting began, often escalating to physical abuse. Neighbors reported hearing loud thuds and muffled yelling. Her young son, Maximiliano, witnessed these frightening episodes, paralyzed with fear, hoping they would end quickly. Ironically, Carlos often spent pleasant weekends with their son, creating a strange dichotomy between his behavior as a father and a husband. By the end of 1987, Alicia took legal action against Carlos, accusing him of violence. After filing a report with the police, Carlos threatened her, leaving her so terrified that she asked her mother to stay with her for protection. Her mother soon witnessed one of Carlos's attacks firsthand. As Alicia had described, Carlos arrived early in the morning, pounding on the door and creating a scene. Alicia clung to her mother, trembling in fear. It was her mother who finally convinced Alicia that this had to end once and for all. In an effort to start over, Alicia moved back to Uruguay, where she opened a beauty salon and invited a friend to work alongside her. Rumors suggested that Alicia was gradually regaining her emotional balance and had even begun a relationship with another man. However, Carlos continued to interact with their son, and the lack of a formal custody arrangement caused ongoing disputes. In the summer of 1988, Alicia traveled to Mar del Plata, Argentina, to retrieve her son after Carlos failed to return him as promised. She wanted to bring Maximiliano home and also sought child support, as her previous attempts to secure financial assistance had been ignored. At the time, Carlos and Maximiliano were staying at the home of a close friend, Adrian Martel, an actor who lived with his own son, 3 years older than Maximiliano. Adrian later shared his memories of Carlos, describing him as eccentric, but someone he loved like a brother. However, some incidents he recalled were deeply troubling. On one occasion, Carlos handed his young son a knife, so large that it resembled a sword to the boy, and told him that if he ever encountered legal trouble, he could solve it by using the weapon without hesitation. Adrian's son, who overheard the conversation, looked at his father in disbelief. The boy couldn't tell whether Carlos was serious or joking. As a school child, he found the situation deeply unsettling. He noticed that Carlos had been drinking and eventually dismissed the incident as a poorly conceived joke. Adrian later recounted that Carlos eagerly awaited Alicia's arrival. His main goal wasn't to resolve issues about their son or child support. Instead, he intended to persuade her to stay with him once again. It seemed he was using their son as leverage to manipulate her into reconciliation. Despite Alicia's resolve to stand her ground, she succumbed to Carlos's charm, and their relationship resumed. Predictably, nothing changed. Carlos remained as manipulative and abusive as ever, and their toxic cycle continued. Everything came to a head on February 13th, the night before Valentine's Day. Carlos attended a birthday party for a friend, drank heavily, and returned home to find Alicia and Maximiliano waiting for him. Around 3 in the morning on February 14th, Carlos initiated another drunken altercation. By 5 or 6 in the morning, a distressed neighbor called the police after noticing 2 bodies lying on the ground near the balcony of the house across from his window. When police arrived, they found a severely intoxicated Carlos and the lifeless body of 32-year-old Alicia, dressed in lingerie. Given the couple's celebrity status, the news spread rapidly, becoming a public spectacle. The crime scene descended into chaos as onlookers and journalists gathered. Authorities struggled to secure the area from being trampled by the crowd. At the time, Carlos and Alicia had been staying at Adrian's house. Adrian's son recalled waking up that morning to find the house in disarray, with shattered glass and spilled soil from flower pots scattered everywhere. Oblivious to the events in the courtyard, he left to play arcade games with friends. Upon returning, he was shocked to find the house swarming with forensic investigators and strangers. Carlos, 40 years old, was taken to a local hospital, where doctors discovered a broken collarbone and several fractured ribs. Despite his injuries, his condition was stable. There, police questioned him about the incident. Carlos initially claimed he had little memory of the night due to his intoxication. He admitted to arguing with Alicia about his drinking, slapping her, and pushing her to the floor. In subsequent interviews, his account evolved, suggesting that during the struggle, they both fell from the balcony. Carlos maintained that he never intended to harm Alicia, insisting the incident was a tragic accident. After his release from the hospital, Carlos was immediately arrested and taken into custody. The case garnered significant attention in Argentina and beyond. Photos of Alicia and Carlos dominated headlines, radio programs, and television broadcasts. Public opinion was sharply divided. Some viewed Carlos as a murderer, while others defended him as a champion whose former spouse was partly to blame. Carlos continued to assert his innocence. Over the following weeks, the case was clouded by rumors and speculation, making it difficult to discern fact from fiction. Prominent figures, including Susana Gimenez, shared their perspectives. Susana publicly condemned Carlos's violent tendencies, recounting how he had struck her in a Rome hotel in 1976, leading to their breakup. At one point, Carlos was even rumored to have been involved in drug trafficking, as his father had died from substance abuse. However, these accusations were overshadowed by his reputation as an undefeated boxing champion for 7 years. The medical examiner's report revealed damning evidence. Alicia had sustained trauma to her left temple consistent with a powerful punch. She also had bruises around her left eye and the corner of her mouth, likely caused by repeated blows to her face. This report intensified the case against Carlos, suggesting a clear pattern of violence. The woman suffered a fracture at the base of her skull and her left kneecap. Due to the traumatic brain injury, internal bleeding occurred, resulting in swelling. Despite the obvious nature of these injuries, the conclusion stated that Alicia's death was caused by hitting the ground and was an accident. To all those who cared, it was evident that this was a lie. New rumors emerged that Carlos was trying to avoid justice, and another scandal was brewing. Following this, the victims' relatives turned to independent experts for a repeat examination. Naturally, it showed that the cause of death was not hitting the ground, but some impact on her neck. According to the forensic expert hired by Alicia's family, the woman had simply been strangled. Coincidentally, during Alicia's funeral, her husband was participating in a reconstruction of the crime scene, which took place at Adrian's house. A large crowd gathered there, shouting insults at him. The police had to stop aggressive people several times to prevent them from enacting vigilante justice on the champion. A few months after this, Maximiliano turned 6. The boy faced a harsh reality, having lost not only his mother, but also his father. He lived with his mother's relatives. The former champion faced a public trial broadcast live, becoming another event watched by the entire country. The key witness was a man named Rafael Boes, who was collecting trash on the street when Carlos returned home from the party. He said he suddenly heard a woman screaming, which caught his attention. So he turned back to see what was happening. According to him, Carlos grabbed Alicia by the neck on the balcony, delivered several powerful punches to her face, and she fell to the floor, unconscious. The man saw with his own eyes how the champion picked up his wife and threw her off the balcony. It looked as if he was disposing of unwanted garbage. Rafael watched the events unfold through the bushes. Carlos changed clothes, removing the pants he had been wearing during the assault on his wife. Afterward, he jumped off the balcony near the body. By that time, it turned out Alicia was already dying from her brain injury. Their son, who was 6 years old at the time, was in a nearby room while his father killed his mother. Defenders claimed that Rafael was simply seeking fame. According to the lawyer, the cleaner could not have seen anything because thick bushes surrounded the mansion, obstructing the view from the street. Additionally, detectives concluded that part of the struggle with Alicia occurred inside the house, which he also could not have seen. This sparked another wave of negativity and disputes in court. During the hearings, the accused contradicted himself repeatedly. The champion behaved like a teenager afraid to take responsibility for his actions. He even tried to justify his actions by claiming that there was another person in the house who incited him to throw the body off the balcony. This was never confirmed. After preliminary hearings, Carlos Monzon was sentenced to 11 years in prison in order to pay compensation to the victim's family. This story remained in the media for a long time. The former champion continued to insist on his innocence, coming up with new excuses. As a result, he was convicted, and the killer ended up behind bars. Once, he was transferred to another correctional facility in the city of Santa Fe. According to reports from the management, the famous boxer's behavior was exemplary. This even allowed him to receive various privileges in 1994, including occasional permission to leave the prison walls. However, on January 8, 1995, this led to his death in a car accident approximately 35 kilometers from Santa Fe. Following this, Alicia's family decided to cremate her remains and return them to her homeland. Her son Maximiliano also remained under the care of his maternal grandparents. When the boy grew up, he was able to give several interviews to television hosts, sharing what it was like to live under such conditions. He wrote that he had suffered greatly psychologically after his mother's death and the trial, requiring many years and the help of specialists to cope with the consequences. He believed that his grandparents played a significant role in helping him overcome these challenges. Out of respect for his mother, he decided to follow in her footsteps, attempting to build a career in film and theater. Interestingly, Maximiliano admitted that he had long forgiven his father for what had happened, though he was certain that Carlos had killed Alicia. He believed his father drank too much and simply didn't understand what he was doing. Maximiliano thought that if Carlos had not died in the accident, they might have developed a good relationship. At the very least, he believed his father would have made an effort to connect with his family, just as his mother had always tried to do. What do you think about this story? Did anyone figure out its conclusion during the narrative? Share your opinions in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe, and all the best to you. See you next time.